The night was darker than usual, the kind of darkness that seemed to breathe, swallowing the moonlight whole, in the heart of a forgotten African village. There was a girl named Naya, whose name carried whispers of mystery wherever it was spoken. Naya was poor, too poor to own even a decent pair of sandals. Yet she was clever, and cleverness in a land bound by ancient curses was both a blessing and a danger. It began with a drop. Not water, not blood, but something older, something the ancestors warned about long before Naya was born. Legends told of a crimson liquid hidden deep beneath the roots of the Irako tree, a liquid that could bend fortune and fate for anyone daring enough to touch it. The elders said it was not meant for human hands. For those who drank or even used a single drop would invite both wealth and wrath into their lives. But hunger makes people bold, and desperation sharpens a mind like a blade. Naya stumbled upon it by accident while searching for firewood. A thorn sliced her palm, and the blood that dripped into the soil revealed a faint glow from the ground below. She dug with frantic hands until her fingers brushed against a stone jar, sealed with patterns older than her tribe's memory. She should have walked away. She should have buried it again. But instead, she opened it. Inside was a liquid that shimmered like liquid rubies under moonlight. It pulsed as though alive, as though aware of her presence. A strange heat rushed up her arm as she touched the jar, and in that moment, she knew the stories were true. Naya didn't drink it. She didn't dare. But she tested it. Just a drop. Placed carefully on the old bracelet her grandmother left her, turned the rusty beads into shining gold. Her heart pounded. What had she discovered? A curse or a miracle? The very next day, she traded the bracelet in the marketplace, and the merchant's eyes nearly fell from his head when he saw its brilliance. For the first time, Naya walked away with a heavy pouch of coins. But one coin led to another, and soon she was coating pebbles, scraps of iron, even dried leaves of that forbidden drop, transforming them into treasures that dazzled the eye. Word spread fast. People whispered about the girl who could turn dust into wealth. They called her the daughter of fortune, though the old women in the village shook their heads and muttered prayers against her name. For with every coin she earned, shadows seemed to grow thicker around her home. Dogs barked at her door at midnight. The wind carried voices only she could hear, and her dreams became filled with ancestors who stared at her in silence, their eyes glowing with sorrow and warning. Still, Naya pressed on. She was addicted, not to wealth itself, but to the power of knowing she had tamed what others feared. Soon she left her village behind and traveled to the city, where her name became legend. She bought land, mansions, and servants. She dressed in fabrics richer than queens, her skin adorned with jewels that outshone the sun. But each time she dipped in the jar, the liquid seemed a little darker, a little heavier, as if feeding not only her greed, but something else unseen. Then came the night. She hosted a feast unlike any other. Nobles, chiefs, and foreign merchants filled her golden hall, eating and drinking until their laughter shook the walls. They begged to know her secret, how a poor village girl rose higher than royalty in less than a year. Naya only smiled, her lips painted with crimson wine, her fingers heavy with rings. But as she raised her cup for a toast, the chandelier above flickered and the room turned cold. From the shadows at the edge of the hall, a figure appeared. No one else seemed to notice. Only Naya saw it. The tall, skeletal shape draped in the colors of night, its face hidden, but its voice echoing inside her skull. "You have fed well," it whispered, "but you forget nothing is ever free." Naya froze, her cup trembling. The figure pointed to the jar hidden in her chambers, and in that instant she understood the weight of her bargain. The drop she used so carelessly was not a gift. It was a debt, and debts, no matter how long they're delayed, must one day be paid. Her laughter cracked, her smile faltered, but the guests only cheered louder, thinking it was all part of the night's revelry. Yet deep inside, Naya knew the shadows had come to collect. And still, when dawn broke, when her heart begged her to stop, when her grandmother's warnings echoed louder than ever, Naya reached once more for the jar. "Would you like me to continue from here into the unfolding of her downfall, or do you want the story to twist into her using the curse in an even more cunning way to outsmart the force that hunts her?" Her fingers lingered on the jar's lid, as if it were the beating heart of a wild animal. unpredictable yet thrilling to touch. The room was still, the echoes of laughter from a night before faded into silence. Her servants slept in distant quarters, and outside, the city streets were empty, bathed in the pale silver of dawn. She hesitated, chest rising and falling, breath shallow, but temptation moved her hand like a puppeteer pulling invisible strings. The lid groaned open, and again the liquid pulse, crimson yet deeper now, almost black. It rippled without wind, as though something within stirred. She dipped the tip of her smallest finger into it, barely a brush, but the heat shot up her arm, sharp and urgent, searing her veins like molten fire. She gasped, pulling back, staring at the market left, a faint, glowing line that crawled across her skin before vanishing into her wrist. This was different. The jar was changing, or perhaps it was her. Naya pressed the drop onto a broken wooden comb lying nearby. The kind servants tossed away. The wood hardened, darkened, then shone like polished ebony with silver veins running through it. It was no longer just wealth. It was something beyond, something alive. She clutched it in awe, knowing that any man in the city would pay a fortune for such a creation. But as she held it, a whisper slithered into her ear, low and cold. "More," it breathed. "You must give more." Her blood chilled, yet desire burned hotter. She should have closed the jar, buried it back in the earth where it belonged, but greed had already wrapped itself around her soul like chains. She carried the comb into the market, where even the richest jewelers gawked at its beauty. A wealthy trader from across the seas demanded to buy it, offering not coins but fleet of horses and silks. Naya smiled, sealing the bargain, her name spreading further beyond her homeland, across borders, into the mouths of strangers. The world began to bow before her, yet the shadows never left. At night, she would wake to find her mansion walls bleeding with faint red lines. Servants whispered of seeing figures in her halls, faces that were not human, eyes that glowed. Still, she dismissed their fear with gifts, with wealth, with distractions, until the dreams came. In them, she stood alone in a vast desert under a blood-red sky. Her grandmother appeared, face stern and sorrowful. "Child," the old woman said, "you trade with the dead. Every drop you use, a spirit chained. Every coin you take, a debt owed. Do you not hear them crying?" And then the desert shifted, filled with thousands of figures, wailing, reaching out, their mouths open in endless screams, their bodies dissolving into sand. Naya awoke drenched in sweat, her sheets tangled, her chest aching with terror. But when morning came and she saw the gold and silk around her, she silenced a warning voice inside. The jar was never full. Each time she opened it, the liquid seemed less, yet the hunger in her grew more. She began experimenting, pouring drops onto weapons, onto cloth, onto statues. Each object became something wondrous, something powerful, and she sold them to kings, warlords, and priests. Her wealth became an empire. Armies carried blades that shone like fire because of her. Rulers sat on thrones she crafted. Temples gleamed with offerings she provided. She was not just rich anymore. She was feared, revered. But the more she gave, the louder the whispers became. She would hear them at feasts, in the middle of conversations, in the laughter of children, even in her own reflection. Ours return what you took. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky crimson, a procession arrived at her gates. At its head was a blind priest, his eyes covered with white cloth, his hands clutching a carved staff. His voice, though frail, shook the air as he demanded to see her. Her guards hesitated, but Naya, curious and unafraid, allowed him entry. He stepped into her golden hall, tilted his head as if listening to something unseen, and then whispered, "You carry what was sealed by our ancestors. That jar is not treasure, child. It is prison." Her laughter was sharp, mocking, but her heart pounded. Prison for what? For the hunger of the earth, for spirits too wild to roam, too greedy to die. With every drop you spill, you unbind them. Do you not see them already walking your halls? Naya's lips tightened, but she did not answer. The priest's head turned slowly toward the chamber where she kept the jar locked. "You think you are master. You are servant. And soon, when the last drop falls, you'll belong to them." Before she could reply, her guards dragged him away, tossing him back into the dust of the streets. Yet his words clung to her mind like burrs she could not shake. That night, she did not sleep. She sat by the jar, staring, trembling, torn between hurling into fire or clinging to its power. Then, as the moon reached its peak, the jar shuttered on its own. The lid rattled. A crack ran through its side, and a hiss-like breath escaped. Her eyes widened in horror as faint figures began to seep out, wraith-like, faceless, their limbs stretching and twisting. They circled her, their voices overlapping into a chorus of whispers, laughter, and cries. "Daughter of fortune," they hissed. "Daughter of debt." Her body froze. She tried to move, but her limbs were heavy, her chest tight. They leaned closer, brushing her skin with icy fingers, and in that moment she understood. The jar was not running out. It was emptying itself into her world. And still, despite the terror, despite the warning, a dark thrill rushed through her veins. She whispered to herself, "If I command them, if I bind them, then I will not just be rich. I will be eternal." She reached out, her hand trembling, stretching toward the shadows, and as they hissed and swirled around her, she felt the power surge like fire and storm combined, her eyes glowing faint red in the darkness. The world outside slept peacefully, unaware that the balance of life and death had begun to shift in silence at the hands of a girl who had once been poor, but now held an ancient hunger in her palm. The figures did not vanish when dawn broke. They lingered, clinging to corners, slipping across the floor like smoke, watching her with eyes that weren't eyes at all. Naya walked among them, her step slow, deliberate, every part trembling yet unwilling to show fear. Her servants saw nothing, yet they shrank back from her as though some part of her aura had grown sharp and unwelcoming. She dismissed them one by one until the mansion lay quiet, then returned to the chamber where the jar sat on its pedestal. The crack across its side had widened overnight. Crimson mist leaked through it, twisting and writhing in the air. She wanted to believe she still had control, but the truth pressed on her chest like a stone. The jar was no longer hers to command. It was awake. And yet, even in this realization, another voice whispered in her heart. The same greedy voice that had followed her from the first day she touched that forbidden liquid. Asterisk power is never given freely. Naya, it must be seized. They came from the jar, but you opened it. They owe you. Asterisk. She swallowed hard, gathered the courage left within her, and spoke aloud to the shadows. "If you live because of me, then you serve me. If I feed you, then I am your master." The chamber fell silent. For a breath, she thought she had won. Then laughter erupted high and low, hundreds of voices woven together. The figures rippled, growing taller, sharper, their forms curling in mockery. One voice rose above the rest, deep and echoing like a drum in a cavern. "No, child, you did not feed us. You freed us. You are not master. You are vessel." Her pulse hammered. Vessel. The word clung to her skin like fire. She stepped back, but the shadows followed, their tendrils brushing her arms, her face. One pressed against her chest, and she felt it, something inside her shifting, as though they had begun to root themselves within her very soul. Panic seized her. She slammed the jar shut, ignoring the hiss that escaped as she did. The figures screamed, their bodies shattering into mist, sucked back into the crack. Silence swallowed the chamber again, but it was not a silence of peace. It was a silence before a storm. That day, Naya walked through the city with a smile carved on her face, dazzling in silk and jewels, her every move radiating confidence. Yet inside, fear gnawed at her. She could feel the jar's weight even when she was far from it, hear the faint hum of whispers crawling through her skull. Each time she blinked, she saw flashes of red skies, deserts full of wailing spirits, her grandmother's sorrowful eyes. She told herself she could still bend this curse. She just needed to learn more, to understand what she had awakened. Wealth had bought her everything else. Why not knowledge? So she summoned scholars, mystics, priests, even wanderers who claimed to know forgotten lore. She asked them of the jar, of ancient prisons, of spirits bound in vessels. Most trembled, some fled, and others warned her in hushed voices that she had touched what even kings feared. One woman, a seer with white-painted eyes, dared to tell her the truth. "The jar is not treasure," the seer said, her voice thick as honey. "It is a hunger clothed in beauty, a river of the dead. Every drop you used tore away a piece of the seal, and now the river has found its course. Through you, you cannot stop it. You can only choose how it ends." Naya's jaw clenched. She would not accept such weakness. "If it must flow through me, then I will shape it. I will not be consumed, I will be crowned." The seer only shook her head and left, her painted eyes glimmering with pity. Naya returned to her chamber that night, alone. She lit no lamps, letting only the moonlight bathe the jar. Its crack glowed faintly now, like the ember of a dying fire. She touched it, and heat seared her palm, yet she did not pull away. She could feel their power trembling inside, like a seed desperate to spill free. Her lips curled into a smile. Perhaps they were right. She was vessel, but what vessel could not choose what it poured? She whispered, soft but firm, "If I cannot banish you, then I will bind you. I will wield you." The lid trembled. The crack pulsed. The chamber shook as the shadows pressed against the stone walls, swirling in agitation. She spread her arms wide, opening herself to them, and for the first time she did not resist when they slid into her skin. They poured into her veins, burning like molten fire, but she stood tall, gritting her teeth, forcing her body not to fall. One by one, the voices filled her skull until they were deafening, 1,000 echoes screaming in unison. She nearly collapsed under the weight, yet her will anchored her. Slowly, painfully, she bent them toward her command. When she opened her eyes, the chamber was still again. The jar sat dull and empty, its liquid gone, its crack widened into nothingness. But Naya no longer needed it. The hunger now lived inside her. She stepped to the mirror, her reflection strange and haunting. Her eyes glowed faintly red, her skin carrying veins that shimmered like molten gold when the light struck them. She touched her face and smiled. She was no longer merely the daughter of fortune. She was something greater, something feared, something untouchable. In the days that followed, her power unveiled itself. Crops withered in neighboring lands unless she willed them to grow. Armies bent their knees before her without battle, their leaders trembling under her gaze. Merchants offered kingdoms for her favor. Kings brought daughters to her doorstep in hopes of alliance. She spoke, and the earth seemed to obey. She lifted her hand, and winds shifted, flames bent, shadows knelt. But power has a price, and each display carved its toll upon her body. The veins beneath her skin grew darker, the glow in her eyes more constant, the whispers in her head louder. She became both worshipped and feared, a queen without a crown, a deity clothed in flesh. Yet inside her chest, a hollow ache grew, an emptiness that no jewel, no empire, no army could fill. The people called her savior, goddess, destroyer. They built temples in her honor, carved statues that reached toward the sky. But at night, when she lay alone in her chamber, she felt the presence stir deeper within her, restless, hungry still. They were not satisfied. They never would be. And one night, as she stood upon the balcony of her palace, looking out over a city bathed in gold and fear, the voice returned, the deep, echoing one she had heard on the night of the feast. "You have taken us in vessel," it said. "You command, but you do not own. You burn bright, but every flame consumes itself. We gave you wealth, power, glory. Soon you will give us what we have always wanted in return." Her hands tightened on the railing. She lifted her chin, refusing to tremble. "And what is that?" The air around her rippled, the stars dimmed, and the voice answered, slow and certain, "Your eternity." The city never forgot the night the sky bled red. It began as whispers of unease. Servants swore they heard drums beating the clouds. Children woke screaming from dreams of shadows with too many faces, and animals ran in frenzy as though chased by fire. Then the ground itself trembled, the air thickened, and a crimson hue stretched across the heavens. People poured into the streets, pointing to the palace where their so-called savior, their goddess, stood alone on her balcony with eyes glowing brighter than the moon. Naya raised her arms to the sky, her figure clothed in silks that whipped around her like flames. The shadows within her surged, their power coursing through her veins, their voices roaring in her skull like a storm too vast to contain. She had become both vessel and master. Yet with every breath she felt herself thinning, her essence pulled from her body as if she were the wick to their endless fire. The people below dropped to their knees, crying out praises, begging for blessings, some in awe, others in terror. They did not see her trembling fingers, the strain in her jaw, the way her body convulsed as though tearing itself apart. To them she was radiant, untouchable, divine. But inside, she felt the truth pressing against her bones. They were consuming her, and the promise of eternity was not one of life everlasting, but of being devoured whole. The voice rose above the others, echoing across the night. Your eternity is ours, Naya. You have tasted wealth, commanded fear, bent the earth, but now you belong to us. You are not goddess. You are Gate. Her heart thundered. Gate. That was the truth she had denied all along. The jar had never chosen her as mistress. It had chosen her as threshold. Through her, the hunger of countless spirits could pour into the world unchecked. Every coin, every gem, every throne she had gained had only fed their strength, until now they no longer needed the vessel intact. They could tear through her and claim everything. For the first time in years, fear, real, raw, human fear, wrapped its hands around her throat. She staggered back from the railing, clutching her chest as the voices tore through her skull. Memories flashed in rapid bursts, her grandmother's wrinkled face warning her with sorrowful eyes, the first drop that gleamed like a ruby beneath the iroko tree, the joy of holding a pouch of coins that promised freedom from hunger, the laughter of merchants, the bows of kings, the trembling hands of servants, the temples built in her name. And finally, she saw the faces of the spirits she had glimpsed in her dreams, the thousands wailing in endless deserts. They were here now, clawing at her from within. The crowd gasped as cracks of red light spidered across her skin, glowing veins spreading from her chest to her arms, her neck, her face. She looked like a woman carved from molten stone, breaking apart from the inside. Still, she raised her hand, forcing herself to stand tall, her voice ringing across the city. You call me goddess, she said, her words sharp but trembling with fury. You kneel because you think I am eternal. But listen to me now. No power is ever free. I opened what should have remained sealed. I fed on what belonged to the dead. I thought I held wealth, but it was only debt. I thought I was crowned, but I was chained. And now they demand what was promised. The crowd stirred, confusion rippling among them. Some wept, some shouted, others prayed. But Naya's voice only grew louder, piercing the thunder in the sky. If I am Gate, then I will choose how it closes. The voices inside her screamed, 1,000 wails blending into a deafening roar. They clawed at her soul, demanding obedience, demanding surrender. But for the first time since she touched the jar, Naya did not bend. She clenched her fists, raised her arms to the bleeding sky, and summoned every shred of will that remained in her battered body. The power surged, burning her flesh, tearing her veins apart, but she forced it outward, not inward, dragging the shadows with her. The city shook, the palace walls cracked. The people screamed as winds ripped through the streets, carrying with them the shapes of twisted spirits clawing to remain. They shrieked, they howled. But Naya stood unmoving, her body glowing brighter, her scream echoing across the heavens. She would not let them spill into the world. If she was Gate, then she would slam it shut even if it shattered her. Her figure blazed with light, so bright the people could not look. The spirits, furious and desperate, hurled their voices at her. We gave you everything. We made you more than human. You cannot defy us. Her lips curled into a final, defiant smile. I was human before you found me, and I would rather die human than live as your prison. The explosion tore the night apart. A pillar of red and gold fire shot into the heavens, splitting the sky, shaking mountains miles away. The palace dissolved into dust, the ground quaking beneath the force. The people were thrown to the earth, covering their faces as the storm consumed everything. For what felt like hours, the city was drowned in fire and shadow. Then silence. When the dust settled and the dawn finally broke, the palace was gone. In its place stood a crater vast and hollow. Its center burned black, its edges shimmering faintly as though the earth itself had been scarred by something beyond mortal reach. The people rose slowly, eyes wide, bodies trembling. The goddess they worshipped was no more. The jar was no more. The voices were no more. Only silence remained. But silence was not absence. As the sun rose higher, its light caught on the faintest shimmer at the crater's heart, a fragment of gold, glowing faintly, pulsed once, then vanished into the soil. The elders whispered that Naya had sacrificed herself, sealing the spirits once more at the cost of her life. Some said her soul was bound to the earth forever, a guardian rather than a vessel. Others believed she had been carried into the realm of the ancestors, crowned not with jewels but with honor for a final act of defiance. Children grew up hearing the tale, told in hushed voices under the stars. The story of the girl who touched forbidden hunger, who rose higher than queens, and who chose in the end not be devoured but to stand as flame against the dark. And yet, in quiet corners, merchants still muttered the riches she left behind. Kings still dreamed of the power she once wielded, and wanderers still searched for fragments of the jar, said to lie buried beneath the ruins. Because greed, like shadow, never truly dies. It waits, silent, patient, until another desperate hand digs too deep, until another soul believes they can bargain with hunger and walk away free. And on certain nights, when the moon is red and the winds carry whispers that sound too much like voices, those who pass by the ruins swear they see her, Naya, standing at the crater's edge, her eyes glowing faintly, her silhouette both beautiful and terrible. Some say she is warning them. Others say she is waiting. But all agree on one truth. Eternity was not stolen from her. She carved it herself, not through wealth or thrones, not through shadows or spirits, but through a choice that burned her name into memory. The girl who refused to be consumed. The girl who faced the hunger of the dead and made her own ending.